Hello, everyone. This is Dale Benson. I'm lead pastor at the Naz Church in Grove City, Ohio, and here on the Serendipitous Podcast again with David Morrison, executive pastor here at the Naz, and Dr. Melissa Wainwright-Benson,
hello,
who happens to be my wife. And so today we're going to touch on a touchy subject. We're going to talk about temptation and lust, and this was probably one of the most requested things that we talked about a few weeks ago, and we've avoided it as long as we can. So
I tried to avoid it.
David, take us away.
Yeah, and we were joking about how, we had a meeting come up, but no, actually excited to talk about this because this is real life. People are struggling with this. They're saying, okay, we've talked about adultery, we've talked about trust, we've talked about forgiveness, but one of the root issues here seems to be lust or a lack of control. We've had people ask questions like, how do I stay away from lust? What does Jesus say about it? Why should I save myself for marriage? Just lots and lots of different questions. Dr. Melissa, I wonder if maybe you can provide for us your perspective on maybe what some of these folks might be dealing with, thinking about. What's been your experience with that?
When I first started seeing the questions come in and more were on lust, I actually think I'm glad that the question was asked, what are people wanting to hear discussed? And I think anytime we see an overwhelming response, that means people are hungry for information and discussion about it. And I think about even back to my teens of thinking about times where I was tempted and remember finding a verse of no temptation has seized you except what is common to man, but God is faithful and will not let us tempted beyond what we can bear. I think
and he will provide a way of escape.
And he will provide a way of escape. And I think that was comforting to me in a way that it doesn't mean I won't be tempted. There will be things in my path that will potentially be harmful, but when I am seeking him, he will provide a way out. And I joked about that I'm representing the females, and but in a way I'm serious about it because I'm one person who has my experiences, and I think temptation, in some ways there are commonalities, but it's unique to each person. And I just think I found it very interesting that so many people responded with that being an issue that we struggle with. And I think kudos to the people who brought that to our attention.
Yeah, I think in Matthew 6, which kicked this all off, was the section on Jesus saying, you've heard it said, and he will read one of the laws and then say, but I say to you, and deals with an issue in our hearts. So we've dealt with the issue of we're created in God's image, but we're fallen. So this fallen nature that we have is what drives us to things that are not beneficial, not helpful, not hopeful, not life-giving. So this sense of our lusts or desires or temptations. I mean, James tells us in James 1, this is in the New Revised Standard Version, blessed is anyone who endures temptation. Such a one has stood the test and will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who love him. No one, when tempted, should say, I'm being tempted by God. For God cannot be tempted by evil, and he himself tempts no one, but one is tempted by one's own desire, being lured and enticed by it. Then, when that desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and that sin, when it's fully grown, gives birth to death. So don't be deceived. And so there's this sense of we want to blame situations or circumstances and things when really sin is just taking advantage of what's going on in our hearts, and it's being directed towards something else. That word for desires, the desires that we have is the Greek word epithumia. Epithumia is translated desire, and it's translated lust. And the only way we know how it's being translated or how to translate it is context. So later on in James chapter 4, it will say, God earnestly longs for or jealously desires the spirit that he has placed within us to be faithful to him. sort of thing. There's this, since the word that's there is lust, it's the same word. So God lusts for the spirit display. That sounds weird, but we don't translate it there, lust, because it's just this strong desire. And so I think our desires are shaped by our temptations. And the more we give into something and the more we taste it, the more we like it and the more we go that direction. Like I go fishing in the Keys, and there's times where there will be people from the Far East on the boat. And when they're there, the crew, the mates hide all the squid. It's just raw, cut up squid. And I'm like, why are you putting it all away? I need the squid, to fish. And they're going, no, all the people from the Far East here, they just start popping it in their mouth, eating it raw. You're going, that is the nastiest, stinkiest, smelliest thing I've ever heard in my life. But they have eaten it so much as kids that it's become a delicacy, and they can't believe we're just putting it out as bait. And so they're popping it in their mouth, eating it. You're going, how could you eat something like that? The same thing's true with sin, that there are things that we begin to feed, and the more we feed it, the more it takes over in our life. So the way we overcome it, I think, is by fixing our eyes on the things of God and allowing Him to shape us and turn us and change us. But that's not always easy in our society. And
being really careful to not deviate from that, because it's one step leads to the next step, and it's not always a set out to get so far off the path. It's a slow fade. Yeah. And
sorry, we're quoting Christian music lyrics. It's this sense of the little things move us that direction. Yeah.
Because it might start out as, oh, this isn't so bad. And that leads us down a path that when we would look back would be way far off course. And I think you said that really well. And when we were looking at the percentage of questions coming in, I really was encouraged, I guess, by how you shared that lust has two sides, the desire for good and then the opposite way. Yeah, so I think we
have to begin to, so Paul says it in Romans 12:1-2. Don't be conformed to the world, but be transformed by the renewing of our mind. That's not an easy process. We'd like to think, oh, I've given my heart to Jesus. Jesus is going to make this so easy to walk now. But it's not the case. We've got stuff programmed in our brain, in our hearts, in our bodies that we just react chemically to whatever. Our sex drives or whatever they are that we feel. And those drives are not always godly. I think St. Augustine talked about caritas and cupidity, this two kinds of love. Most of you will recognize the word cupidity. It sounds like stupidity, but it's from the word Cupid. And so it's this erotic-driven feeling. I just go by what I'm feeling. I'm going to do whatever. It's kind of the whole love is love kind of thing. And that's not really true. But so in Latin, this sense of cupidity is this desires that are drawn to things that aren't quite right, where caritas is the word from which we get the English word charity, which in the King James Version is what's used for love is this, love is that. They'll say charity is this. Now by these three, faith, hope, and charity, rather than faith, hope, and love. It's in the Latin, that word, that caritas, or Greek, that word is rightly ordered. It's the rightly ordered sense of what love is and what it should be. So how do we begin to order our lives around the things of God so that I'm not merely driven by my hormones or my lust to say that's not love? They'll say, who are you to say that's not love? Well, I don't know that I'm the expert on it. I know I'm not the expert on it. But as I read God's word, God has shown us what love is and how we live that out. You're about to.
No, I was just listening and taking it in.
Oh, I thought you were about to say something. So how do we order our lives in such a way? I know some people will say, well, you're just pushing away these feelings. Well, yes, at times I am, to help renew my mind, transform my mind to be what God has called me to be, to live in a rightly ordered place so that His love is what flows out of me, I'm not drawn by every feeling that I have that takes me somewhere. Yep. I test those things. I look at those things, and I want them to be ordered the right way. We know that probably many of us have heard a sermon or somebody talk about different words in Greek for love. There's eros, which is sexual love, this base-driven love, phileo or philo, which is where we get Philadelphia from, the brotherly love, or agape, which is this self-giving love. And most of the time, the desires that we have, James mentions it in the scripture we read earlier, they're selfish desires.
Right.
So how do we become more selfless and less selfish, more selfless? Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. And, as I think about temptation, I think one of the questions that we often get is, and it may seem a little more basic, but is it a sin to be tempted? Is it okay that we're tempted? What does that look like?
Oh, great.
Oh, yeah.
This is not meant to be the Dale podcast. I'm looking over at Melissa, and she's looking back at me. So temptation and sin are two very different things. And I realize our desire would be to get rid of temptation. And I remember asking my uncle one time, he was in his 70s at the time. I think I was in my 20s. I was a young pastor. He's an older, retired pastor. And I asked him a question about a particular sin that I was, as a temptation that I was struggling with. And so I asked him, how do you overcome, this thing? And he looked at me kind of confused. And he goes, I don't remember the last time I was tempted by that. So then I felt like, oh, great. I just admitted that I'm struggling with this temptation. And I think he saw the confusion on my face or the hurt on my face. And he goes, now, wait, that's not to say I don't still get tempted. He said, Satan is, like a roaring lion going around. He's manipulative. And he said, so now there's new things that tempt me. It's not that I'm free of temptation. It's just that those things don't tempt me anymore. The pastor I used to work for used to say, the temptation of the young man is seduction by sex. The temptation of the old man is seduction toward security. And he said, so when I was younger, my hormones drove me. And so I didn't depend on God because I was wanting whatever I wanted. He said, now that I'm older, what I want is security. Will I have enough money for retirement? Will my family be safe? And so where I worry and where I struggle and where my temptation is not to rely on God, but rely on my riches, my wealth, my stuff. So I'm like, so basically we're always going to be tempted. He's you're always going to be tempted. So temptation itself is not a sin. The question is, do I give in to that temptation? And for many of us in our society today, the things that tempt us via television, via social media, via the internet, all those other things, tend to push us toward our more base desires of sexuality, of power, of money, of these things that we think will somehow bring happiness or power or whatever it is that's going to get me where I need to be. And God's word says the opposite of those things. So reprogramming our minds and understanding how to move away from some of those things. Once we have figured it out with some things, there's always going to be another temptation that comes up. Satan's always going to find something new to tempt us with. It'll just be different. And that's why we've got to be on the watch. It's because there's always going to be something new to tempt us.
That's why the scripture says, be on guard.
Yeah.
Be watchful, knowing that there's an enemy that wants us to go down that other path and is kind of studying us. And
I would say that's one of your, I tease Melissa about her different soapboxes, but that's one, is that how do we guard our homes? How do we guard our hearts? How do we guard our marriages? How do we guard ourselves from those temptations? And it's that being on guard.
I think it's an offense and defense of realizing that there's an enemy that wants to derail us. There's a God that wants us to overcome those temptations. And I think to your point about we will be tempted, and it may be the same temptation for a long series of time. It may be new ones. Having those boundaries and recognizing where my temptation might lead to something lustful is not knowingly putting myself in those situations of saying, I don't need to watch that television show because it's leading me to this. And that can be hard because the plot may be very interesting, but there's other parts that are added in that could cause temptation.
I would say our temptations, I guess, what most of us, what I watch people struggle with and what I struggle with. So my temptations, like we joke at church about my Coca-Cola addiction sort of thing. But quite often, even when I'm trying to stop, part of what drinking Coke as much is the temptation is one toward immediate gratification versus long-term health. You know, what do I know this is bad for me in the long run? Yes, but right now I need to stay awake, or right now I need to pick me up, or right now, whatever, my body's craving it. And so the same thing is true with sexual gratification. I don't know how many people I talk to in my office that they want to be happy and they're seeking that happiness in some sort of relationship that they think necessarily has to have a sexual facet to it. Mm-hmm. And whenever that enters the picture, when it's outside of God's plan, it ends up bringing pain. And quite often, people here know one of my questions is, and it's not a smart aleck question, it's a serious question, is that working, or how is that working for you? Because usually in their sentences, as they're describing everything that's going on and where their life is, it's not working. So when do we wake up and go, this is not working, and I'm causing harm or damage to myself or to others? What ends up happening with sexual sins specifically is the harm and damage that we're causing ourselves. Nobody's pointing out. We don't know that that's the reason. It's some other reason. It's not these sexual sins that I'm committing. It's not that I'm treating myself as though I'm an object, or letting other people treat me like an object, or I'm treating others like an object, because I'm not treating like an object. I have feelings for them and they have feelings for me, and this feels good, and we're two adults, so shouldn't we be able to do this? That's the most base, it's the most base, stupid argument for the reason to do something. But we do that, and then when we feel used or betrayed, or we feel not fully like what we're supposed to be, and we sit around and go, I just don't know what's going on. I don't know why I'm thinking this way. But we've believed the lies that we've seen on television or watched on social media, or we haven't even touched on pornography and all that kind of stuff. I'm just talking about just the basic stuff that we take in and that we allow to shape our minds.
Yeah. So one of the conversations I have, you mentioned meeting with people in your office. Yeah. I talk with a lot of people that are getting married.
Yeah.
And it blows me away the number of folks that have already made the decision to live together before they're married.
Yeah.
And the assumption is that comes with all of the sexual facet of the relationship and other things there too. Whereas, in the Christian understanding of that, that's not God's best for us. But the lie they believe, and these are kids that have grown up in the church, is, well, how do we know we're compatible before we get married? What would your guys' response be to that?
I'd rather hear your response, David, since you do all the premarital counseling.
Well, I don't know if I do all the premarital counseling. I would just say, hey, go talk to Pastor Dale. I'm kidding.
I think in some ways it goes back to how divorce has become so palatable. You're talking about these are children who've grown up, or they're now young adults, have grown up in church. And I think some has been a concern of, well, I don't want this divorce thing, so I'm going to try this out. And I think it has become a part of the aftermath of this increase in divorce. I think that's a part of it. I think there's also this is just what I want to do. This is I think my next step, and not realizing that, I think you said it really great, it's not God's best for me.
Most people don't. Even most people that have the arguments that way. I'm not always someone who wants to run a statistics to prove something that I think is morally correct or incorrect, but sometimes statistics bear themselves out in this. Those who cohabitate before marriage and are involved sexually, they will point to, well, this couple, they did things the right way and they still ended up getting divorced, so it's not working out. But statistically, those who cohabitate and are involved sexually before marriage have a higher divorce rate than those who don't. That's not to say that those who don't have 100% success rate. They're not going to have 100% success rate. And part of it is because I think we have built a false assumption. I had a false assumption. I would say that if I stayed a virgin till I got married, and my wife stayed a virgin till she got married, we got married and we were both virgins and we had done things God's way, then everything's going to be perfect. That sex the first time is going to be so out of this world, unbelievably, because we've honored God and what's going on. And we have not taken the time as a church to talk about sexual things or walk through those types of things. And so it's become kind of taboo. And so then there's an extremely intimate part of a marriage that people are just totally walking into blindly. They don't know how to talk about it because it's been taboo. It's a very rough thing to walk into. And we need to address those things. But to say, oh, if we cohabitate, we need to try things out. Statistics say that's the dumbest thing to do. But most people don't want to hear that because you carry in with you baggage. Paul will say any sin that we commit is outside our body, except for sexual sin. Sexual sin is something where you're sinning against yourself and what's going on. There's this cleaving. That's the Old Testament King James word of coming together as one, being made one. That happens in sex. It doesn't just happen when I make a vow in marriage. It happens during sexual intercourse, that there's this cleaving that happens. And then when you break up or pull apart, there's a literal ripping apart that takes place. We don't see it physically, but sometimes we feel it in the destruction of how I feel, of self-esteem, of different things. And so if people are continuing to cleave and leave and cleave and leave, there is a pain that takes place there. I don't talk about that much, but I know for me, there was physical pain that you feel in your heart and other just in your body from the tearing back apart, and then the coming back together is tough because there are scars there that you bring into that next relationship, and then if you've not learned to talk about it. It's still hard to talk about. And so you're not being fully open. And if that can't happen, then bonding can't happen. Then intimacy can't happen because you're not really bonding because you're not able to talk about it. My boys got mad at me. I did the same with Brooke, not as harsh because I was a dad talking to a daughter, but with the boys, when they turned 13 or 14, we went out and had our special steak night where we would talk about sex stuff. And I would make them describe to me what sex was. So it was.
Did everyone eat steak again?
Yes. But it was funny because my youngest, he was like, "You're joking about it," and I said, "Okay, now tell me seriously, without laughing, because you're going to be in class. You're going to talk about these things. You need to be able to talk about this without being uncomfortable." Dad, it's uncomfortable. I know. So we're going to talk about it tonight until you're not uncomfortable anymore. And so we finally got to the place where they could talk about it. And we could talk about their bodies, a woman's body, these kinds of things, not as some taboo thing, or I can only joke about it because it's so uneasy. To be able to say, you need to be able to have these conversations. And when you get married, you need to be able to have these conversations with your spouse, to be able to talk to them about it. It's not going to be taboo. We're going to talk about it. Now, I was more comfortable with my boys. I wasn't as comfortable when my daughter came in and said, "Hey, Dad," I think she was like 15. She just started dating. And she comes in, she goes, "I know you don't like me to spring subjects on you, so I want to talk to you about sex and good boundaries. I'll be back in 10 minutes. Take your time." And left the room. And I'm going, I do not want to talk about this.
I'm out of here.
Yeah. Can I please leave? And then she came back in and we had a great conversation. Well, I don't know if she felt it was great. I felt it was horrible. But then later talking to her counselor, she's like, "It's great you all could talk about this." So how do we have those conversations ahead of time so that we don't get into places where we feel like I have to have sex. Everybody's having sex. It's okay. Or if I've had sex, now I'm horrible. I'm no good. I shouldn't be able to get married. I'm a wretched person. That's the other side of the coin of how do we guard ourselves in the ways that we talk about sex to realize you said it's not God's best. Are there ramifications for premarital sex in our lives, in our future marriages and stuff like that? Yes. Does it mean that you're forever tainted and you can never be as good as you were, or whatever the case is? Because sometimes I think there's this feeling, well, if I'm not a virgin, I might as well just. It's like I'm no longer pure, so what's it matter? Kind of a thing, and we've lost out on. It's a lie from Satan that we've tried to get people led around by their feelings, their emotions, and their libido. And then once they've messed up, oh, you can never go back. You can't be who God wants you to be. And that's a lie. So I think we need to protect ourselves. We need to protect ourselves before we get married, not wait till we're married to then try and protect our marriage. You can start protecting your marriage before you ever get married.
Wow.
That's good.
Yeah. I think that's really good. And it's just a powerful reminder that even if things have happened out of order in our life or we've messed it up, there's still hope.
Yeah.
There's hope for everyone that's listening that might feel too far gone, or those that are making plans for their future. Now, we've talked about the problem a lot, and I know we're running out of time, and this could be a whole nother podcast. But I think one of the things that we've gotten to see over these last several episodes is just the amount of obstacles that you guys have overcome, and how you've embraced that together. How you communicate well with each other. And obviously there's some really good things happening in your relationship. What are you guys doing right now that maybe we could learn from to develop intimacy in this part of your life, in your relationship?
One is, I think, being willing to have conversations, to speak, to also listen, and be willing to, I guess for me, it's to continue to open up my heart, to allow for a growing of a relationship. I feel like one of the things that is a strength is that we're willing to hear each other's hearts and to do our best to not harm each other's hearts. And we're both committed to that process.
Yeah, I would agree. Melissa's great at that. She's probably a little more reserved. And so there's moments I have to pull things out of her that she's going, not right now. I don't want to talk about that yet. Or,
no, I was just thinking little was very generous.
Yeah, okay. Okay, good. She made a funny face. I couldn't tell what it was. Yes. So I wanted to be polite. Melissa's a lot more guarded than I am in some of those things. I've got to be careful that in my openness, trying to be truthful, trying to be honest, trying to be transparent, that I'm not also hurtful. And for Melissa, she's got to learn, what she's had to learn is that for me, when she's not open and transparent, it's hurtful for me, maybe sometimes more than if she just hit me square between the eyes with what's bothering her or something I've done. And not that it's not going to be hurtful when she tells me, but because of some things and baggage that I have, hiding it hurts me even worse. Like, I don't know if hurt's the right word. It's just it triggers some things within me that send me down a path that's not good. So there's moments where, because of that, and because I know how it triggers, I want to open up and I want to get this stuff out and let's deal with it. And because of the way she's been hurt, she wants to shut down, which sometimes in relationships, it's the opposite with men and women, but she plays a little bit more the masculine side of that, and I play a little bit more the feminine side of that.
This is definitely going to be another podcast.
Yeah. So in our next group therapy session, no, I'm just kidding. So I think there's that. It's just, we don't fit the typical stereotypes all the time with that stuff. That's what I'm trying to say.
And honestly, that's probably how a lot of people are. We're humans. We're created uniquely.
Right. And
putting two people together, they're going to have differences, and there's just a continuing to love, to care, to respect each other enough to keep pushing the parts that are harder for us. And for me, it is opening myself up more, and it's not because he's done or not done something. It's part of I think it's part of who I am. But it is something that I have to be willing to say, okay, how do I open up more?
So I would say, again, we've talked about therapy, going and talking to people about that stuff. But as we were just talking about differences, and we got way off of temptation and stuff, but I would say that to kind of close this out, I guess, when you look at how different people are, I think sometimes, especially Christians, believe, if we're both Christians, we're both being led by the Holy Spirit, then we should just get along, we'll act the same, we'll talk the same, and everything will be wonderful. And it's not the case. That's why there's books like Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. Biologically, and we do things differently. And those are stereotypical books, so that not everybody fits those molds exactly. The 5 love languages, we each have different love languages. Love and Respect, Emerson Eggerich's book, that talks about the crazy cycle on how women communicate and how men communicate and how we get in these cycles. All of those different books are helpful if we will listen and realize, okay, these books are speaking in stereotypes very largely. So that's what I was trying to say a moment ago. Melissa fits some of the stereotypes of women, but not all of the stereotypes of women. I fit most of the stereotypes of a male, but not all of the stereotypes of a male. So if I try to shove her into a stereotype all the time, it's not going to work. I've got to listen, and that's why I've been able to figure out, she doesn't fit the stereotype here. So I don't fit the stereotype. How do we have those communications? That's where a therapist is very helpful to help you begin to hear each other. And so we encourage people, go to the marriage course here at the NAS or wherever you're at. Find something called the marriage course. It's a great class. Here at the NAS, we also have what's called marriage mentoring, where you're put together with an older couple who kind of walks with you through stuff. And this is for people, whether you're struggling in your marriage or not. Go to these things, spend time in these things. Melissa and I we don't go to those things because we feel like our marriage is messed up. We go to those things so that our marriage doesn't get messed up. I don't always take my car in for oil changes and get the tires rotated and balanced so that the car continues to run well. I have it checked in. I have the oil change. These kind of things happen so that it's not all of a sudden, oh, crud, it's broken down because I've not been taking care of it. We want to do the same in our marriage.
And to reframe even so it's not messed up to how might it be even better? What are ways that could really enhance each other as individuals as well as a couple?
Matson's calling. We could ask him what his thoughts are. Melissa's son is calling to talk to me, in fact. So that'll be fun.
Oh, well, that's awesome. I'm glad that we had this conversation, that we didn't run away, that we talked about temptation and lust. And I know that we've learned a lot today.
And I think this is evidence that we can get off course if we're not careful. Right?
This podcast is a production of Grove City Church of the Nazarene. You can find additional information and resources online at thenaz.church. And we encourage you to follow the Naz on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. If you have thoughts or questions regarding the podcast, you can email us at podcast@thenaz.church.